What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk Hockey here, back again with another video, continuing on this off season of a lot of different questions, a lot of different rumors. We're talking about Jack Campbell today. So in my last video, I briefly touched on it, and if you haven't seen that, make sure to go check it out. Starting off the NHL off season for the Toronto Maple Leafs, at least. Of course, there's lots of teams still in the playoffs. Good luck to all of them and their fans. But starting off with some trade rumors and some news, because there's been a ton of stuff going on. So if you haven't seen that, make sure to go check it out. But if you are new here, make sure to like this video and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Join the squad. Lots of Leafs news and rumors and everything like that. There's going to be a weekly live podcast I think I'm going to do. Before, I was going to do it as a recorded thing, but now I might do it live. I think that works really well. I'll promote it once the first one is going to happen. I'll promote it to you guys and we'll go from there. But Jack Campbell is what we're talking about today because this is probably one of the biggest question marks going into the offseason. And in my previous video, I touched on the fact that I believe that the goaltending position is where the Leafs need to focus a lot of their time. They need a guy that, if they are bringing back Jack Campbell, they need a guy that can play with him for half the season or more, or they need to move on from Jack Campbell and get a legitimate starting goaltender. Now, there's already been Leaf fans speculating, trying to say John Gibson, which we can get to that in another video, but I'm not really sure how that one works, and I'll explain my reasoning. There's been a lot of people saying, like Chris Johnston, he's basically been saying that they might look for the next version of Jack Campbell, but you can't convince me and other Leaf fans that the Leafs are just going to go out there and look for another diamond in the rough and hope that it works out, when this could very well be their do or die season. A lot of people should be losing their jobs at this point, and the team will probably lose some very high-end talent because they're getting close to the end of some of these contracts, and they need to win these guys over to stick around, especially Auston Matthews. So if you go into this next season and you don't have a starting goaltender that you truly believe in, then it's going to be a problem. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at something like this: Jack Campbell pending UFA. I just absolutely love being a Leaf. Now, this is where I need to break it to you guys in the easiest and simplest way without hurting someone's feelings. I love Jack Campbell. I know you watching this probably love Jack Campbell, especially as a person. He's a great guy. He's humble. I wish him all the best, and I actually do hope he's a Leaf next year. Excuse me, but it has to be at the right price, and just because I like the guy doesn't mean that the Leafs should fork out a bunch of money and just hope that it works out. William Nylander, like I've said this before, William Nylander is my favorite player. If they trade him and get better, no problem. Nazem Kadri was my favorite player. They traded him. That happened. No problem. Whatever. We can't have a bias and an attachment to a player to the point where you're okay with just giving out money and not making a move just because you like the guy. You can't do that. You have to know that this is a business, and if the Leafs can get better without Jack Campbell, then that's how it's going to have to be, because Jack Campbell's contract might outprice the Leafs. They might not be able to afford him if the number that comes in is high. Now, there's been rumored numbers that the Leafs offered around $2.75 million to Jack Campbell, which is definitely a lowball offer. Like, people seem to forget that these are negotiations, because if he just accepted it, then Dubas would have looked amazing, because then he could go out, trade Mrazek, and try to get another goaltender in there. But for now, it's looking like he's going to be looking for a more significant raise. His previous contract was $1.65 million. He's definitely going to be getting more than that, because might I remind you, Peter Mrazek got a deal that was around $3.8 million AAV, and it still has 2 more years on it, and they have to find a way to trade that. Jack Campbell's agent is probably going, hey, listen, Jack was an all-star this year. Sure, he had a bit of a rough part of the season, but if you're going to give Peter Mrazek $3.8 million, we have to come in above that number. So that's where the Leafs kind of shot themselves in the foot. They have to outpay the Mrazek contract. They can't just pay Jack Campbell way less than that. So some of the rumored numbers, and I don't know if you guys caught it, but Chris Johnston was on SDPN on the Steve Dangle podcast. Cheap plug there. Go check that out. But he does it every year where he talks about certain players, and he wasn't certain. I don't want to radio him, and by that I mean I don't just want to say something, because I'm kind of, doing this a little bit of a mumble. I'm not really saying that this is the exact thing he said. I'm not, quoting him. But he basically was kind of on the fence about whether or not Jack Campbell would be back. And there was a lot of things that surprised me in that podcast, especially with Jason Spezza, which, again, tons of videos coming. I'll get to that. So make sure to like this video and subscribe. Tons of content, Leafs content coming. But basically, he wasn't so sure. So I'm not really sure if the Leafs are going to be able to hold on to him or if they want him. But it's very up in the air because apparently there's been rumors that they want to get him like a $6 million contract, like his agent and his team want to get him $6 million plus or just under $6 million, which, again, it's all speculation, it's all rumors, but when it comes from an insider that usually follows the Leafs most of the time, you start to wonder if this is actually like a number that he's looking for, which I think is way too much money. And again, I love Jack Campbell, and he played really well in parts of this season, but he also had bad stretches. And this is what I brought up in the last video. So if we're looking at his entire season, you'll see if we're going by save percentage and goals against average, he had a really, really hot start to the season. These first few months were really, really good. But then you start to see it tail off, and not for a couple weeks. For months at a time, he was really not good. He had a really, really bad stretch of games. And then towards the end of the season, he kind of figured himself out a little bit. And then in the playoffs, he was back and forth of being hot and cold. Like you'll see here, shutout in the first game, not so good in the second. Great in the third game, not so good in the fourth. Great in the fifth game, bad in the sixth game, pretty good in the seventh game. So he was back and forth, a little bit hot and cold. And that's where it gets a little bit scary because he's not a consistent goaltender when he gets to play a full season, because this is his first year of being a true starting goaltender. Because of the previous years, he hasn't had that big bulk of experience. And again, I'm making it seem like I don't want Jack Campbell back. I definitely do. But you have to consider the cost of what Jack Campbell is going to get, because in the open market, Campbell definitely gets more money. I wouldn't be surprised if a team like the Oilers is all over a Jack Campbell come the offseason and pay him, close to $6 million, because they're not going with Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen or whatever. That's not what they want to do. So there's going to be teams that will pay for him in the offseason, but I don't know if the Leafs can get to that number. And I know some people have already talked about this, but I think it's pretty much common knowledge if you're looking at contracts. Linus Ullmark is probably a pretty good comparable when talking about a contract that could be given out to a guy like Jack Campbell. 4 years, $20 million with the Bruins. He's got the no trade clause, the no move clause, the modified one, all that stuff. So if you look at his numbers, he's had, a couple stretches of having, not the best numbers, but then he started to play a bulk of games for Boston this year and really put up good numbers. Even with Buffalo, he was putting up pretty decent numbers. Playoffs haven't been too friendly to him, but definitely a good goaltender and worth that contract, in my opinion. But the Bruins could afford to pay him that. Whereas the Leafs, I don't know if they can afford to pay Jack Campbell and roll the dice and hope that he ends up working out and that he doesn't have these really rough stretches again. So the Leafs have to approach Jack Campbell and say, listen, in your first season, you were hot and cold. You weren't all the way through the season playing absolutely incredible, amazing numbers. And sorry, guys, I'm pulling up another thing here. That's why I'm looking at the other screen here. But they have to look at him and say, listen, like, your numbers weren't incredible the whole season. You weren't like shutting down the league for multiple months in a row. That was only the first couple months of the season. Then he had a really, really rough stretch for a good portion of the season. So when it comes to Jack, if the Leafs can get him at the $4 million number, I would probably be pretty comfortable. But he's going to get more than that in the open market. And when you look at goaltenders that are available, unrestricted free agents, I'm using Sport Track right now, so this, if something's wrong in here, I do apologize. But Kemper is more than likely staying with Colorado, and he's going to get paid. He's going to get probably at least 6.5. Marc-Andre Fleury, I'm wondering if the Leafs try to take a flyer on him and get him at a way cheaper number. He's definitely not getting $7 million. But if you can get a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury, you'll still need to get another goaltender, because I'm seeing people out there just saying, oh yeah, just get Marc-Andre Fleury. That's great. No, Fleury is not lights out like he used to be. He's not an amazing elite goaltender anymore. But if you have a combination of a Marc-Andre Fleury and a Jack Campbell, or a Marc-Andre Fleury and, hypothetically a John Gibson or somebody else, like maybe you take a flyer on Jonas Korpisalo, who had a really rough year, but, he only played 22 games and he's still a pretty decently young guy. He's only 28. Like, Jack Campbell is 30 years old. You have to remember, you get a guy that's a little younger, get him on a cheap deal and hope that he works out. But you still, again, I'm going back to my first point. You still need to get a guy that you can 100% trust is going to get you wins. And I don't believe that any of these guys besides Kemper is going to be a guaranteed money in the bank, amazing goaltender that will win you games. Maybe Ville Husso from St. Louis, but he's going to re-sign there in my opinion. But it's basically between Kemper, Campbell, and taking a flyer on a Husso or a Korpisalo. Like, you need to have multiple starting goaltender like caliber guys. Like, you can't just walk into the season with somebody that you don't trust. So I'm just going to predict right now that Campbell does stay with the Leafs, but I'm really scared to see what that number is, because he needs a goalie partner that can play a huge bulk of games. Like, I'm talking like at least 30 to 35 games. We can't just have Jack Campbell coming here and playing 35 to 40 games, because you've seen this season when he plays too much, it doesn't work out. I know he was battling some injuries, but that's also part of it. The Leafs were forced to play him that much because Mrazek wasn't good. Shalgren was decent for a little bit, but he really did not have that good of a season. Joseph Woll and Ian Scott are nowhere near ready, and when they do get a little bit ready, they're injured all the time. So, and then they just signed that Hobey Baker goaltender, who's definitely going to need North American AHL experience. So we'll have to see what happens, but this is just some of the info, my thoughts. We'll get deeper into this once we do a podcast as well. So be on the lookout for that. Let me know down below. What do you guys think? Is Jack Campbell going to stick around? Is he going to go somewhere else? How much money is he going to be worth? Let me know. Like I said, if you are new here, make sure to like this video and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Join the squad. I'm really confused on what's going to happen, but let's hope he stays and that it's a good number, because I do like the guy, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to just fork out a big contract for him. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or stream. Peace.